So there's a number of key businesses within the industries that are highly dependent on nature. And so the impetus for them is almost existential, to actually revalue what is our relationship to nature and bring nature as a key stakeholder and work with nature.
Hello and welcome to WSP's Positive Impact podcast. I'm your host, Lucy Siegle. In this series, we explore the ideas, innovations and voices shaping a more sustainable, resilient and future-ready world. Today, we're diving into the world of nature finance, a term that might sound abstract to some at first, but for those in the know, well, they claim it is one of the most practical and powerful ways to tackle environmental challenges and unlock local economic opportunity. And today we're focusing on Yorkshire, often called God's own county, a region rich in natural capital, diverse landscapes, and now a living testbed for how environmental restoration can drive economic regeneration. So joining me are Ed Dick, CEO and co-founder of Great Yellow, Ludo Pitti, Director Landscape Advisory, WSP, Sean Berry, Head of Environment and Sustainability, North Yorkshire Council. Well, welcome to all of you. Let's get into it, shall we? Because we've got lots to discuss. Now, let's start with the critical question. What is nature finance? Ed, let's come to you first.
Great question. So nature finance is putting money, not always money, but normally money, into landscapes to achieve two things. So the first is clearly to improve the environmental outcomes of that landscape. And then the second thing, but connected to that, is to improve a way of either doing business or maintaining assets or a societal benefit. And typically the two come hand in hand. So you want the nature benefit to lead to the societal, the economic benefit, and vice versa.
So clear. I mean, how can we go wrong when we've got such a great, clear explanation? Sean, Let's get an explainer from you.
Yeah. So I think there's the saying, money doesn't grow on trees. I think in a sense that's true. But what we would say is money grows in trees. And in a way that if you plant a tree and you have that absorbs carbon, that carbon is secured inside that tree. And ultimately that is a credit we can transact and ultimately trade or sell. And that if that nature finance is in essence the same thing. So we're enhancing the environment. We're planting trees, which is good for our communities, good for reducing our carbon footprint. But ultimately, we can turn that into a transactional opportunity, which is that economic angle that Ed talks about.
Ludo, you want to come in here?
Yes, just want to come in just to add an extra point. I think nature finance isn't about selling off. So we're not giving land to private investors. That's not what nature finance is about. It's not about displacing communities. It's not about compromising farmers' way of life. It's very much a framework to engage to change how we value nature. Because the fundamental issue in our modern economy is that the value of nature has been hidden. And as the Dasgupta review qualified, over half the world's GDP is highly dependent on nature. So it's a framework to help correct how we bring value back to nature.
Well, thank you very much. I think we've got a really nice basis there from which to explore. I don't think that will be the first time that we'll mention the Dasgupta review. So maybe we should have like a swear jar. No, it's good. And we'll put a link actually. So if anybody wants to see that and they're not familiar with it, they can have a read. Now, I'm also really interested in your collaborations and how they came about essentially. So how does it work in practice? Have there been any ups and downs? You know, be honest. You can be as authentic as you like here. Let's start with you, Ed.
First thing to say, as Sean was just mentioning, is that nature markets are in their infancy. Mm-hmm. And therefore collectively, and who do I mean by the collective? I mean public sector. I mean big entities like WSP and small entities like myself at Great Yellow. We have to build these nature markets together. And there's no way that any individual institution can do that. In that kind of building process, which is effectively innovation, so we're trying to innovate our way into these markets, there are always ups and downs. You know, we're not trying, there's no tried and tested means of doing this yet. So I think there have been periods of ambiguity where we've struggled for clarity of direction. I think there have been periods of kind of real breakthroughs. We've identified a big issue, and this is a solution that is genuinely workable. And I think it's both very exciting and at times, obviously, a lot of trust is required, I think, to kind of make that collaboration really come to fruition.
Well, I feel like we've got the band together here. So let's explore how did you meet? How did you start the project?
Yeah, so the LINK program, or Local Investment in Natural Capital program, is a DEFRA funded program. So there was a cohort of local authorities that were who applied to be part of this LINK program, and it's very much around how we attract private investment into enhancing nature, or natural capital, as we call it.
Okay, we'll explore a little bit about how it works, but let's bring Ludo in. Yes,
that's right. So just to complete the puzzle,
yes,
WSP has been lucky to work with North Yorkshire for about a decade through a long-term partnership agreement. And so after North Yorkshire, on behalf of a collaboration with the Combined Authority and the City of York and National Park authorities, secured the LINK funding, we then started to discuss how we could work together to actually put the mechanisms in place to address the ambition behind the LINK program. And so as we were discussing this, that's where we decided to bring Ed and Great Yellow. We'd already been speaking and had known Ed for over a year by then already. It took us a good 6 to 8 weeks to agree the what and the how, because obviously you have a brief with government ambitions and program, you've got budget constraints, you've got program constraints, which has led us to where we're at today.
It's very exciting, isn't it? Okay, well, let's drill down into a little bit, because we do hear some of these conversations and they can be a little bit theoretical, but you've got some really good working examples. I would say almost a blueprint, or should we call it a green print? And it really shows how other regions in the country could pivot as well and embrace what you're describing. And it seems to be you're describing it as an opportunity. So let's kind of get into some of the examples and some of the specifics and how scalable and replicable they are, I guess. So I'm going to come back to you, Ludo, actually, and see if you can talk a little bit deeper about the project.
Yes, of course. So as I mentioned, part of the ambition for LINK is about looking at how do we unlock institutional investment fundamentally. Government has helped build the foundations towards creating a market. BSI, the British Standard Institute, has just released documents for consultation last month on standards, for example. So it is very much a live exercise. But the government has also invested in different scale of testing how private investment can go into nature. There's been the Natural Environment Investment Readiness Fund that's been going for 3 different cycles. There's been the landscape recovery schemes that are looking at kind of farm cluster level. And really, to tap into institutional money, you need those regional scale. And that's where local authorities like North Yorkshire and the Combined Authorities have a key role to play because of the vast size of it. And you're not going to get institutional investors interested in a regenerative agriculture scheme on a 100-hectare farm, right? You need hundreds of millions in opportunities for them to invest. And that's the whole premise behind the program. So all the authorities have internal demands, be it from biodiversity net gain and regulations, net zero plans and ambitions and offsets. So a lot of it is from an in-setting perspective. What can they do? Is there capital they would already be spending for those nature outcomes that can be aggregated internally and put forward towards investing in their own efforts? And the next level down from the demand is really about how do we bring projects. And there's a lot of brilliant work happening individually within the region. We identified over 50 projects that are already happening with public grants. So it's not like we're lacking initiative, but it's about how do we stimulate those initiatives to go a step further. And there's a knowledge gap simply in organizations that have for decades been used to applying to public grants to all of a sudden tap into natural capital market.
It's so different, isn't it? Such a different approach. And Sean, I know you're really keen to come in here. So yeah, let's hear from your perspective.
We've got a number of projects that are seeking to restore these habitats that are happening locally. And we've got natural flood management schemes that, such as USWIM, and the Long Preston floodplain, which is very much around slowing the flow or utilizing land to store water, which is really, really good. We've got peatland restoration and around re-wetting of peatland bogs, which is fundamental for storing carbon. If they dry out, they release carbon, and we're going to go backwards in that reduction of carbon that we need.
So we know that local authorities are under extreme budget pressure. How does this help or exacerbate those problems?
So I think it could be a solution, but equally it remains a challenge. So as you say, local authorities are under financial constraint, and we have obligations to deliver services, and that will always continue to exist. But from a nature aspect, we've talked about that opportunity for nature being economically advantageous. So could this be something that is local and surrounding us, but a solution to our economic woes? And that's very much where the local investment and natural capital program is seeking to explore that opportunity, which is about enhancing nature but equally looking at the economic benefit, which could be a solution to some of the challenges that we face as local authorities. When we've brought projects and investors together, we've quickly realized that the investors have almost an investment mandate that exceeds what those projects that exist already within our region that are already happening. But when we're trying to connect the dots between the project and the investor, there's a divide. There's what we call a missing middle. So that gap between the project and the investor is very much where the LINK program is coming in. It's trying to connect the dots between that investment, those large scale investors that exist who recognize this nature market and they see the potential, but the projects aren't able to scale up yet. But there is an abundance, like Ludo said, that are already happening. It's almost how can we go beyond what's happening through government grants or philanthropic funding and project locally.
Do you think that I'm just kind of conscious that I've had a lot of nature finance conversations, and I don't hear from local authorities that much.
Yeah, I think obviously local authorities have climate emergency plans, and many have declared ecological emergencies because they recognize the important role of nature alongside carbon and decarbonizing. We're statutorily that we're obliged to deliver local nature recovery strategy. That's a statutory implement that we have to deliver. And there's a question of how that will be delivered. So could LINK be the delivery vehicle and the finance mechanism to deliver the local nature recovery strategy, which local authorities live and breathe within their communities? They see that is part of their geography. So who better to convene partnerships with projects on the ground, or to be the anchor, as we've touched on, within a demand or aggregating the buyers club, or be a focal point for leadership and bringing parties together to have good governance, which local authorities do. We have good, strong governance. We have the bones of strong project management, and that's sort of, we exist to deliver things and for our communities and for our residents. So ultimately, why not include nature and look at ways of supporting what surrounds us? And if that has a wider economic benefit and a health benefit and a climate benefit, then that's good for everyone.
It sounds like a regeneration of local authorities as well. Yes.
Well, I was going to add that, nature is inherently local. So unlike carbon, which you can kind of plan nationally, we can decarbonize the grid and so on. Nature, the battle is won locally. And I think the hugely optimistic point here is that actually local authorities they have a lot of skills. As Sean said, there are a lot of program expertise. How do you deliver complex programs locally? They're good at that, and that's what we need. And it's really exciting, I think, that we have the 4 LINK programs, but actually they are the catapult, and everyone can then kind of follow on. And I think that's hugely optimistic, actually, in the kind of climate and nature crisis that we face.
Yes, it is, and a very good thing to focus on. But if we were starting again, Ludo, what would you do differently?
That's a good question. I think trying to get a lot of that learning sooner, because it would have allowed us to leap forward faster. Because ultimately, it's a race against time. So the faster we can get those delivery mechanisms in place, the better. But we have done that learning. And the key is not everyone needs to do the same learning again. So that's the part of the reason for being here and on this podcast is actually that sharing of the knowledge is so fundamental because we don't need every single local authorities around the country to go through the same learning experience, right? And that's why those communities of practice and knowledge forums are fundamental so that we can fast track how quickly collectively we move forward. But I think we have clarity now as to what is the endeavor and what are the mechanisms. And these are scalable fundamentally. And I think that's what gives me a lot of hope is a lot of the structures that we described until now can be scaled to the whole of the Yorkshire region, for example.
Hold that thought about scaling, because I want to come back to you about that. But Ed, I just want to ask you, anything you would do differently? And also, how do you track positive impact?
I think there are two ways to do this. The first is in terms of monetary flow. I think that's one really easy binary way to do it. And my hope is that will come out quite favorable. I think the other way is a bit more kind of qualitative, which is talking to our 50 or so projects that Ludo spoke about earlier, and giving them this kind of sense of hope that they can go so much further than what they thought that was possible prior to this program. And if they can do that, we can see this landscape scale change that we really need to achieve in the region.
Very important. Okay. Yes, Sean.
I think the thought around measuring success, I think definitely resonates around the green skills or green language that we can impart to our projects is as a result of the work of trying to bring them and upskill them and shape these projects to be more investable or investor ready. It's almost preparing them for, even if this link program stepped away, preparing them to source their own investment without our intervention. We want them to stand on their own 2 feet. We want them to be able to have the conversations with investors confidently. I think that's very much where those skills and that green finance education, for lack of a better term, can hopefully be a measure of success, because that will stay there. That will exist even if this link program dissipates.
How can clients start thinking about integrating this into their operation? What's the first step? Ed, I'll come to you first.
Many industries are already under kind of reporting standards required to look at the risks that they now face. And typically where that takes them is a list of kind of bad stuff that they need to avoid or is already happening. And then they kind of stop. Yeah. And I think the reason for that is it's still sort of in kind of compliance and reporting mode. I think what Link can do really effectively is show them a way that there's a way to actually implement change in the landscape that would deal with those risks. And so I think it's, that's really important work, understand where the risks reside. And as Ludo was saying, actually the assets at risk, both in the region and nationally, it's staggeringly high. But it's kind of almost like Link is this beacon of hope, whereby practical implementation of well-financed nature solutions on the ground can deal with big industry and big corporate risks practically. And I think that's really exciting. And I think it's another great way in which local authorities could actually be extremely effective in showing and convening that there's a way to get that to happen.
Sean, what would your advice be how people can sort of take that first step?
We know, for example, in York, a lot of businesses are affected by flooding. And let's say, for example, that those businesses recognize that every year they're affected by flooding and that costs their business. Now, let's say they took that economic impact and instead invested it in upstream flood mitigation, slowing the flow, tree planting, or widening out areas which captured more water upstream. So that cooperative of cash, these businesses that come together and invest in upstream mitigation, ultimately is investing in natural flood management, in nature-based solutions. But that will have a positive impact on their business downstream, and that's essentially reducing the economic impact of that flooding that may happen every year. So I think there's opportunities that businesses will be affected by flooding everywhere. This could exist everywhere. We see this on national news, people being flooded, and this will probably become more likely as a result of climate change and the impacts of climate change. As Ed's touched on, the large businesses already have a a requirement for reporting and considering this and how this may impact them. But even small scale businesses it'll be relevant. And this is how I think they could equally be involved in these programs or investing in nature-based solutions.
Mm-hmm. Ludo, a good leaping off point.
Well, good leaping off point, but I think just on the question of what can businesses do, the first thing is understanding and recognizing the role of nature in their business, right? So some businesses, what they do is completely tied to nature, right? If you're a carpenter, where does your timber come from? Mm-hmm. If you're a farmer, well, what is the health of your soils? Because we're going to have a food crisis on our hands if we don't start to address that, right? So there's a number of key businesses within the industries that are highly dependent on nature. And so the impetus for them is almost existential, to actually revalue what is our relationship to nature and bring nature as a key stakeholder and work with nature. Mm-hmm. So it starts as a value point, revaluing what is the role of nature in my business. And if what the business does is not about nature in terms of the produce, it's actually where are they in nature and are they at climate risks? Or what is the indirect impact on nature of what they do if they're restaurants, and where are their goods coming from, right? Mm-hmm. So that is the starting point, is understanding the role, the dependencies, and how do we value it? And then it's doing something about it, right? Mm-hmm. So it starts with bringing nature leadership. So I think there's been a great publication from the World Economic Forum on nature leadership in the boardroom. Mm-hmm. So having a nature chief exec, that then trickles down in everything that the organization can do once that leadership is identified. And you can see that in some brilliant companies like Aviva, right? So there's a lot of people who are starting to recognize that and make those changes.
Yes, very important point. Now, we're out of time, unfortunately, but I've got one last question for which I require a rapid fire response. You're allowed one thing to create positive impact. What would it be, Sean?
I think for me, it'd be a legislative mandate. So I know this sounds really geeky, but for me, having that statutory tool to make this a reality. At the moment, it doesn't exist. So it's very much, if there was legislation that says we had to do this, and I know they're exploring voluntary carbon markets for nature. There's a consultation out at the moment for that, but that legislative mandate and making that a requirement for us to really consider climate change and nature that's it.
Very valid point. There's nothing too geeky on this podcast, let me tell you.
Not at all.
Thank you very much for that, Ed.
I used to think this was a fantasy, but I increasingly see it as reality. Application of AI in this space to the enormous data sets that we have, and those data sets are now plummeting in cost and are much more available. I think they will definitively prove that investing in nature makes that total economic sense. It can reduce cost to assets, it can provide inward investment, it can generate jobs, and I think AI is a really, really great application of it in this space to prove out some of those things that have felt just beyond our reach.
Wow. It's also very nice to close with something that's actually plummeting in cost, because I can't think of anything else.
And environmental impact.
Yes, exactly. I enjoyed that so much. I think that's just such great information that you've got across there, and you've made it much, much clearer, certainly in my head, and I hope to our audience as well. So thank you. Thank you to all of you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy.
That is all we have time for on this episode of Positive Impact. So a huge thank you to our guests, to Ed, Dick, Ludo Pitti and Sean Berry for such a passionate and insightful conversation. I think they've been highly persuasive. If you found this episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe, rate and share the podcast. You can also explore more on today's topic, including useful links and resources in the episode description. So thanks for listening, and join us next time as we continue exploring the innovations shaping a future-ready world. I'm Lucy Siegle, and this is Positive Impact. Goodbye.